So, welcome to Maya. Thank you so much. My presentation is developing a portfolio. The first thing I'm going to say about this is that this portfolio, this presentation, is geared for the student who really doesn't have a portfolio or has a very basic portfolio. If you go through this presentation and say, well, I'm better than that, I know what I'm doing, great, yay for you. But for a lot of people, portfolio itself as a concept is a little confusing, and a lot of the things that you've been doing in your portfolio are not things that we in an admissions office would want you to be doing in your portfolio. That's not to say any of those things that you've been working on are bad, but it's like if you're a senior in particular, why don't we focus this time and this energy on doing exactly the things that art school is looking for. All right, so the first thing that everyone asks in any presentation, whether it's addressed or not, is who is this person? Who is talking? Why should I listen to them? My name is Mark Featherston. I'm the Executive Director of Information Management and Registration Services. That is actually my title. I have to show it because I can't remember it. I have 25 years and 18 days of art college admissions experience. I have viewed literally thousands of portfolios. I know it's more than 10,000. I've worked in admissions. I don't work in admissions specifically now, but I'm still very much involved. Last year for scholarship judging, I was involved in the scholarship judging process, so I saw basically every student. I saw their portfolios through that. I attend portfolio days and review portfolios. I'm also a Maya alum. I graduated from Maya in 1989 with a degree in drawing. All right. So that's who I am. So, what is a portfolio? Portfolio is a sampling of 15 to 20 examples of your most recent visual art or design work. A lot of times students think of the portfolio as being the black suitcase, or most parents think of a portfolio as some form of investment. So, how can you build a portfolio? Classroom assignments, obviously stuff that you do in high school. Work completed outside of class. If you have a sketchbook, if you simply just work on stuff that you're interested in without specific direction, obviously that is a way to work on a portfolio, working in sketchbooks. And then the last one is pre-college programs. Maya offers some wonderful weekend and summer pre-college opportunities. I think any student who is seriously interested in visual arts, pre-college is a great opportunity to develop your portfolio, but also to experience the place, to get a sense of who the people are, what the expectations are, what the work on the wall, along the walls look like. So it's a really great opportunity, and I recommend it highly. So, what am I looking for in a portfolio? And this is me, Mark Featherston, endorsed by no one. What do I look for in a portfolio? I look for one thing. And I look for something that doesn't look like it was done by a high school student. Again, that's pretty vague, right? That maybe isn't that helpful. I'm looking for somebody who is advanced beyond what a typical high school student is. There's no problem if you're a typical high school student. There's no problem if your work reflects that. But I'm looking for somebody who's beyond that. And you can get accepted with a typical high school portfolio. Okay. But let's talk about, instead, what's in most high school students' portfolios. We're going to start with an overly muscular guy with a skull holding a big axe. Okay? Some kind of skull kind of face, and when you look at the muscles, there are far more bumps than any human would normally have. All right? A shoe with no shadow. We see a lot of shoes without shadows. A deer in a forest full of trees that look a lot like brown and green lollipops. Drawing of Marilyn Monroe or Marilyn Manson or Jim Morrison or insert popular trendy rocker movie star here. Strangely enough, we still see Marilyn Monroe and Jim Morrison all the time. But there's always like, you know, the Twilight people or whatever. Another thing, photo of a best friend trying to look tough, sexy, silly. If there's anything I could remove from every portfolio is that. I haven't added the word selfie on there. Next year selfie. I don't recall seeing many selfies, but I know that's going to become a normal portfolio element soon enough. See, look, I took a picture of myself. Let me go to art school. My favorite, an eye, just an eye. I cannot tell you how many portfolios, anyone who's done portfolio reviews, how many eyes we see. Just a piece of paper with an eye, and maybe a tear. That's it. Okay. And pokey anything. That is a very broad category of anime, manga. There's all these words that I keep hearing, and so I just refer to it as pokey anything. Okay. We will see, and I use anything instead of the actual word I wanted to say. Should be. All right. Now, I know each one of you has at least one of these things in your portfolio currently. That is fine, and I didn't say that that in and of itself was bad. It's just typical. It's common. It's what we see. So instead of talking a lot more about that, let's talk about things that you can do that maybe you don't have in your portfolio that you should be doing, things that we're looking for. We're going to talk about things that all portfolios have in common. We're going to start with observation. At its core, we're a visual arts school. You are a visual artist. It is visual. It is observed. So we want to start with observing. What that means is drawings that are done from observation, looking at something and drawing it. I have talked to students who very confidently tell me, I did observe that photograph and draw it. No, that's not what I mean. I mean not making something up, not working from a flat two-dimensional reference, looking at the world and drawing it. Okay? So we're going to start with this drawing. Oh, I forgot the most basic thing. All of this work is high school work. None of it is Maya student work, although many of these students are not Maya students. These are a pair of keys. Okay? Actually, pretty well drawn keys. I have a question for the group. Where are the keys? Sky, floating. My response has always been there's only one place. They're in heaven. They're floating somewhere in some nebula. They're drawn well, but they're floating somewhere. And they're right in the center of the paper. This is a pretty boring drawing of something that looks pretty much like keys. So that's actually very good. They do look like keys. But wow, can we do something else with this? So I'm going to show you some development. So we now have a Diet Coke bottle that I would contend looks less like a Diet Coke bottle than those keys look like keys. But in this case, heaven has an edge. Okay? We can drive right off of heaven and then fall straight down to hell. You know, this is what we can do on this. Okay? We'll edit that out in the final video. So here is what I would consider to be a better drawing of a single thing. This is a drawing of a single kernel of popcorn. It has got a lot more going on in it. There is a sense of shadow. There is a sense of volume, that this is a round, whatever popcorn is, kind of object. You get a sense that the light is coming from this direction, shadow coming in here. It's still just a single object drawn on a piece of paper. And then this is an orange drawn on a mirror. Okay? All of these four drawings are exactly the same thing as a starting point. Now, every one of you will say, well, geez, mine looks a lot like those keys. What can I do? Well, try to think about things dimensionally, having three dimensions, having volume, having a sense of light. How do you get a reflection, a drawing of a reflection where it looks reflected as opposed to a duplicate of the thing? Okay? Those are things that you can work towards. If you're already here and laughing at those keys, I know you had those drawings of keys at some point. It was either 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, or now 12th grade, okay? Everybody's starting at one point and moving to the next point. And I'm hoping that this presentation will give you some idea of where your work can go, okay? And yes, you can draw fruit. We see a lot of drawings of fruit. This, you get much more of a sense of what's going on because there's more stuff happening. But you can draw anything. When we say to draw a still life means something that's not moving, okay? This was a student who was far more motivated by drawing a human skeleton than by drawing fruit. Fundamentally, it's the same problem. There's no difference to it. But if you're bored drawing fruit and drawing a skeleton is going to excite you and make you more engaged and do more, great, do that. And in fact, this is an old standard of mine. This is some AK-47 in a toilet, okay? A little weird, yes, a little disturbing, yes, maybe. But if this is what motivates you to draw a still life, I don't care. By all means, draw whatever you want. One of the things I've always said is, this is probably dated, anything Star Wars is probably really dated, but let's say that you're really obsessed by Star Wars and you want to draw a little Darth Vader figurine. Go ahead, draw the little Darth Vader figurine, I don't care. But make sure it looks like a little molded piece of plastic and not the Darth Lord of the Sith who's in the movie, okay? It's a little hunk of plastic, it should look like one. Anyone know what this is? Pointing outside. Right outside of mine is a sculpture, a large sculpture made out of discarded metal materials and wire. This is a drawing of that. This is a still life drawing, but it's also an exterior drawing. So you can certainly draw something like this. Now, you can not just draw things, but you can also draw environments, whether that's rooms or outside. This is facing out one of the windows of Maya on a very foggy day. Can you get a sense of the fog in this drawing? I think this is a really successful drawing of a park, okay? Anywhere you can sit down with pen and paper is an opportunity for you to draw. If you have a sketchbook with you and you're on the bus, you take the bus to school, every day on that bus ride is an opportunity for you to draw. This is a school in Kansas this is the buildings that are right across the street from the art department window. We all, any of us who look at portfolios, know these buildings because they're basically 5 buildings in view from this one window. We see lots of drawings of this. And the other thing is that drawings don't have to be perfectly realistic, okay? Sometimes we think drawing from observation means recreating photographs. And some of you are probably pretty good at copying photographs. This is a different exploration. This is taking the three-dimensional world and interpreting it in some way. And the more you draw, the more you realize that there is no such thing as a right drawing, as a correct drawing, as a perfect drawing. Because in the end, no matter what, the world is three-dimensional and pieces of paper are flat. So you're always interpreting it. So you can use paint, and I say drawing very loosely. That could be painting, that could be all different kinds of materials. You can see that it is very difficult to see what's happening, but it's really beautiful. It almost leads into abstraction. This is a still life of a bed sheet, and I think it's Kleenex boxes in a room, in 2 versions of it. Okay. This is a collage of a Pepsi bottle. And then this is something that is borderlines collage, a very different take at drawing a building. But they're all done from an observational kind of point of view. Okay. And the other thing that you can always draw is people. People give the excuse, I don't have time to draw, or you don't know what to draw. If you don't have anything, I don't have anything to draw, you have your hands. Draw with one hand, look at the other. Here's an example of that, and here's an example of what you can do with something as simple as just drawing a hand. You can draw your classmates in school. This is actually a self-portrait facing a mirror. So it's a combination of still life, because this is a mirror here. It's a combination of a space or environment drawing, because this is the background, middle ground, foreground, and it's also a self-portrait. So it's this combination of things. And it takes a little while to see what it is, but it's very well done, really beautiful drawing. And then there's figure drawing. Okay? I highly, highly, highly recommend. This is whether you're interested in just photography, or if you're interested in industrial design, or you're interested in any of the majors that we offer, figure drawing is something I recommend every student have experience in. Okay? This is what we call more traditional kind of figure drawing, but this is a drawing where the student was instructed to take charcoal and draw around the figure and leaving this ghost image. And if you look inside of it, you can see the pose of that figure. That's a really wonderful way to approach drawing. Figure drawings are very quick. They're very efficient in terms of learning. You learn a lot very quickly, and you do it over and over again repetitively. You'll do gesture drawings, which take 30 seconds or a minute. A 3-hour figure drawing session feels like 2 weeks because it's incredibly intense and you learn so much about materials, about all the things that you don't know about a figure, all the things that you don't know about observation become painfully clear when you do figure drawing. So what else is there besides drawing? Well, the next category is technique. So what am I going to start with? Oh, look at that, another drawing. But drawing can be, trying to draw, for example, crystal is a very technical kind of expertise. It's a technical skill, so that is what I kind of call technique. This is done from a photograph. I am not saying that you should never ever use a photograph. I mean, that's just ridiculous. We all use photographs as references, but there's a difference between using a photograph as a reference and a photograph that you're simply copying or recreating. This is a really wonderful sensitive color drawing. But technique can be lots and lots of other things. For example, making furniture, or learning how to use all the tools in the wood shop. We heard this morning talking about students using table saws and such. If you have those skills, those techniques, that's a wonderful thing to have, regardless of what areas you're interested in. Using engineering kind of principles to build a bridge, even out of makeshift kind of materials, is a great technical skill. Knowing how to weld. In this case, this student I could see definitely going into industrial design, even though the work that's shown here isn't what I would call industrial design at all. Most students are not going to get industrial design in high school, but having the skills of making things is certainly very valid. Technique is always what I think of with photography. What's the difference between somebody who takes a picture and somebody who's a photographer? It's often technique. Technique is at least at the core of it. And in this case, technique for me means understanding how to capture light. But to be able to capture light in this very specific kind of way. This is a very cute baby. It's a cute baby, but it's better than a cute baby photograph because look at how in focus the eyes are and how out of focus the ear is and the nose. That is using short depth of field, which means that part's in focus and the rest is completely out of focus in a very positive, very interesting way. So for me, that's somebody who technically understands how camera works and how to manipulate photographs through the camera itself, not through Photoshop or some other process later. Basically, this is a digital collage where anatomy drawings were layered into a computer over and over and over. To me, being able to build something like this in a computer and creating something visually this way would be what I call a very strong technique. Students obviously using computers to make images, learning how to use Illustrator and Photoshop and InDesign and those software programs, really important. This is a character designed in a computer, obviously a lot of technical skills involved in that. And obviously this would be where animation comes in. I don't have animation examples to show you because of the time constraint, but you can see this is where that would definitely fit in. Understanding how advertising works, or communicate, what we call communication design, graphic design. Again, oftentimes or almost always using computers to do that. That entire set of skills would be what I would call technique. Taking a single sheet of paper, printing it, and then understanding how to cut it and fold it and turn it into a three-dimensional box. That's package design. Okay. Next area is composition. Composition is the way that information is organized in a page. It can be something that is very abstract and simple, like this. It could be a figure drawing. It could be, everything has a composition, just whether it's good or bad or engaging. But for me, whenever I think of composition, I always put my head towards illustration. Illustration to me largely is about how things are arranged on a page. You can draw, you can make this drawing in multiple ways, but to do it in this very specific way with this central element in here and the visuals kind of coming through like this, that composition is what separates somebody who's very basic at something like illustration and someone who's more advanced. I think that there's a lot of problems with students doing graphic novels or comic book kind of stuff at your age. There's so much stuff that you need to develop. before you start to make your own comic book. However, I will say there's the narrative aspect of comic books, which is coming through in this. How do you tell a story within these boxes? But then on top of it, how are the boxes composed within each element? And then how are they composed on the page itself? I think people who do comic book illustrations at your age, they develop strong composition skills, and they develop strong storytelling and narrative skills. Okay? The fallback oftentimes for those students is the actual drawings themselves. This is a photograph, and I've kept this in my presentation for a long time because I just love how it works. It's got this very basic, very fun moment to it. It's just a really cool photograph of a kid with a dragonfly on his face. But then if you look at it further, you can see here, there's obviously this big visual focal point. And normally if you see an eye going off a page, it kind of makes you just go visually off the page. But this little moment here brings us down here, and this brings us here, and then this brings us back. And so we have this kind of circular kind of approach to how we look at this image, and it makes it much more interesting. It makes us much more engaging, and it's a fun picture anyway, but compositionally it's just wonderful. And when you look at this photograph, it almost has no composition, yet is very sophisticated. It's a very beautiful little photograph of, again, a baby. I think it's the same kid with the big eyes. And we oftentimes, when we talk about composition, we don't think three-dimensionally. But three-dimensional compositions, things that are, in this case, a relief piece, which means it's kind of two-dimensional, it hangs on a wall and comes forward. But any sculpture that you see, any object has a composition, has a physical way of you looking around it and experiencing it from multiple angles and directions. So composition actually is part of sculpture itself. The next topic is concept or idea. So what are the ideas in what you are doing? Whenever artists use the word concept, a lot of times we just throw in the word conceptual. And most people, when they hear conceptual, they replace that with weird. And I don't mean that. I mean concept as idea. That can go in many directions. Whether that is through the visual aspects of this, the way that these are repeated together, the words flowing through here, and how that creates a specific idea. Obviously, this is an illustration that goes with a very specific topic. That would be a concept or an idea. This is the decline of the middle class as a visual way of representing this particular topic by literally putting in angles that are in decline. That's a concept. This one may be a little hard to see, but this is an actual room, probably close to this size, and these are life-size figures that are made out of plastic wrap, like bubble wrap, with lights on the inside and then strapped down with wires. And so there is this kind of narrative of the person. It almost has a feeling of animation, that this person is walking from here to here. But it's very experiential, it glows, it's got a really wonderful sense of all materials. But at its core is this concept of making lit up human beings out of bubble wrap and common materials. This is a photograph where simply taking a photograph where someone is standing on the floor and stretching and turning it upside down creates a very different kind of feel to it. The next topic is identity. Okay, identity is can be in multiple directions. The easiest one to talk about is self-portraits. I believe that all students should probably draw themselves as part of what they do. Doing a self-portrait is a very common thing. It's an extension of figure drawing. If you can't take a figure drawing class, you probably have a mirror, you can draw yourself. You can work towards very realistic versions of yourself. Make sure to draw the environment. You can do things, again, very traditionally, super realistic, super saturated colors, but you can also do something like this, which is very fun and playful. It does not have to, again, be a copying of a photograph. These are students who are wearing masks that they designed and doing self-portraits wearing the masks. These are also very large. How does what you're wearing change by how you present yourself? And you can see the different ways that you can address drawing yourself. It doesn't have to be a straightforward drawing. And in fact, this is a collage, a Xerox collage, where the student took a self-portrait and took it into a very different direction. Now, here's a self-portrait, but it also has this word become anonymous, and then this little thing here. What's that about? Well, that to me is a really interesting bridge to the other form of identity, which is designing logos. Okay? So this is somebody who actually decided to make a logo for themselves, which I think is a very cool idea. What we have here is an extension of that, where a student actually made their own logo, made letterhead business cards, actually as their own business, but that is identity work. Logos for companies is something that all people who work in communication design participate in. It's something that's done very commonly. How can you identify your company through a visual element? And let's take this, for example. We come up with Kaplow, this energy supplement, but they have lots of different kinds. So how does one take this basic idea and change it, expand it, and broaden it so that you always still identify with the product, regardless of how big the product line is? And then the last form of identity, the most important form of identity, is your own identity as an artist or designer. And in this case, this is a student, this is a high school student who has done some work that is very much collage based. I would guess that if I asked most of you, is this done by the same person, you would say yes, it's done by the same person. And it is. You know, these 4 images really don't have anything to do with one another, yet we know that they're done by the same person. That's personal identity. Creativity. Hopefully a lot of the work that you've seen is creative. I'm going to take this in a slightly different direction. This is sculptures that are made just with forks. Taking everyday objects and changing them slightly. Again, the same thing. Forks put together, just glued together in a different way, suddenly creating something that's very different than the original thing. Taking pennies and turning it into a horse head, or computer circuits. This is multiple photographs of a house, an old abandoned house, layered on top of one another and turned into something completely different. So taking something commonplace and changing it and making something new is really one of the ways that I think of as creativity. There's one more thing. I kind of put collage into this category. I always think collage is this great freeing element for anyone who is a visual artist, because you can take existing images and you can change them and augment them. And there's really wonderful things with it, which to me just are completely creative. And whenever I do something with collage, I'm always excited by what the students do, because I have no idea in the beginning where it might go. Well, this one actually is 3-dimensional. The heart element here is actually cut out and floats above, and it almost beats just hanging on the wall, just the air coming past makes it move. Okay, and variety. You've clearly seen a lot of variety in this work. And I think that having variety in your portfolio is an important element, but it's not critical. I think that if you simply draw all the time and are really good at it, you can go to art school. If you're a photographer and all you do is photograph, you can go to art school. But when you're at art school, you're going to do a lot of different things. So having that experience is really important, in my opinion. So what I decided, since you've seen a lot of variety, to focus on one thing, which is sketchbooks. A lot of you have sketchbooks, and what a sketchbook means is it's like one word on a piece of paper and then blank, or the teacher made you draw a shoe and there's no shadow on the shoe. Like that is all that it is. It can be a place where you put poems, where you can put ideas, where you can draw and draw and draw. This is done with big pens. It's probably a basic rule in art school is like, you don't use big pens. Yes, you can use big pens. You can use any materials that you want to. And for me, this is where creativity can also just go completely crazy. You can use all kinds of materials, and you can push things into lots and lots of different directions. The last 2 things that we look for in a portfolio is your ability to communicate, your ability to talk, not just say words, but to talk about your art, to talk about what it means to you, what your thoughts are, what you're doing, why you're doing it, why you're not doing some things. Being able to talk and communicate is a critical part of what we want when we give portfolio reviews. And the very last thing that we see in all portfolios is potential. That to me is always the absolute most important thing, is that what I see with the student is not what they've done, what you've done in your portfolio shows me what you're capable of doing moving forward. And that's ultimately all that we care about. There's nothing that you do in high school that's going to end up in a museum. Okay? There's nothing that any of us have done in high school once you're kind of down the path where you're particularly proud of. Okay? You're going to grow and move and expand. So what we're looking at is your potential to do well at here in Maya. Okay? That's the most important thing. And that is it. Thank you very much.